As far as I'm aware, Dinosaur National Monument is the only unit in the National Park Service that has actually released its own beetles, as opposed to inheriting them from their neighbors. That's in the Colorado River Basin. I'm not sure about some of the other areas outside of the basin. So I'm going to talk about that project today. And Dinosaur is located in the upper reaches of the upper Colorado Basin. Is that good? Dinosaur is located in the upper reaches of the upper Colorado Basin, which means that many of our concerns are certainly, at least in some respects, different from farther down in the basin. We're closer to the source of the water and have fewer of the hydrologic problems that may be occurring farther down. But also, nearly all of our acreage is managed as wilderness, and that has implications for how we actually deal with Tamarisk and our other exotic problems. And we have 106 miles of river that's in high demand for recreational boating, so we've got a considerable constituency in the boating public. Most of our riparian areas and most of our Tamarisk issues are on parts of the river that are accessible by whitewater rafting. And because of our management for wilderness, that counts out some of the things. You won't see track holes or aerial helicopter spraying our Tamarisk problems here. The trade-off is that we've got a relatively intact diversity of native species. And if we do Tamarisk removal in these areas, we're often not talking about huge acreages of monocultures of Tamarisk. We're talking about Tamarisk that is currently still in the process of invading riparian areas. And we have not had to do any active revegetation. We get the Tamarisk out of there, we see the natives come back. And I should say that as well, the notion of carrying herbicides down the river in a whitewater raft, flipping the raft, was there. Kind of puts the kibosh on taking chemicals down the river too. So our tool bag for Tamarisk removal, it really comes down to being hand tools and physical removal of the Tamarisk, which we've done a great deal of, and biological control. Dinosaur is located at the confluence of the Green and the Yampa rivers, and we really have two different river systems there. And I should add, I don't have a slide for this, but in effect we have three rivers because we've got the Green River and the Yampa River, which are both very hydrologically and geologically different. And then below the confluence of the rivers, in effect, we have a kind of hybrid of the two rivers, a combination of some of the same issues. In the Green River, we're talking about a river that's regulated by the Flame Gorge Dam. And the dam and the dam control of the hydrograph is really the driving force in the area of the Kenyan River, which is above the confluence with the Yampa. And you can see here one of the primary effects of the dam has been a narrowing of the channel, the creation of this post-dam floodplain, which is rapidly being invaded by Tamarisk. And we have concerns about habitat for plants. The Yampa River, in contrast, is the last unregulated major tributary in the upper basin. And here, Tamarisk is really kind of a driving force in itself because the invasion of Tamarisk is changing the way that sediment is passed through the river. This spot right here is an interesting example. This has been actually extensively studied. 100 years ago, this patch of Tamarisk would have been here. This would have been an island with a sandbar, with a considerable back channel. And the Tamarisk is actually reducing the capacity of the river under a normal hydrograph to pass sediment through. And the progress of this will eventually be that it will all be a giant Tamarisk sand, and it will be channelized over here. So a similar sort of thing is happening with spawning bars for the endangered native fish. We have a number of spawning bars here just upstream from this. This is Latin bar. And these are important to fish, not just in Dinosaur, but for example, the pike is known to migrate 200 miles from down lower in the river system to spawn on bars that are just a few miles upstream of the photograph. And the third issue is our recreational values. We have 11,000 or so whitewater boaters that visit Dinosaur every year. About half of those are private boaters. A significant number of those private boaters have been visiting Dinosaur for decades. We certainly have a certain part of our boating community that remember what the rivers looked like as far back as the 60s or the 70s. They've been aware that things are changing. This particular photograph was Ellsworth Cold on the Cold expedition. And what boaters like to see are these nice sandy beaches. These are the nice places to camp, nice places to have lunch. And this is the same location as I lived just a few years ago. I've actually moved this Tamarisk since then. But the boaters are aware that there's a problem. So they're a natural source for volunteer labor. And part of our preparation for getting the Beetle was to start thinking in terms of what's going to happen when we start seeing a lot of dead Tamarisk. And one of the things that we wanted to do was avoid having a lot of dead Tamarisk right in our campsites, many of which have been invaded by Tamarisk. So we got the boaters involved as a component of the Weed Warrior program. It's also got them invested as well as giving us an opportunity to do a lot of outreach to the public. There's a brochure is put into every recruitment package that goes out for the private boaters. And it's distributed to the commercial owners. There's some of those out here on the table. Okay, so just to clarify what we're actually using for biological control, this is the only biological control that's going on in Dinosaur right now. It is the northern Tamarisk beetle, northern beetle, and it's the same one that has been distributed throughout Colorado, Utah, and it's the same one that's invading down the Virgin River now and into the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Important to keep in mind that we have 2 generations per season in Dinosaur. This is important in ways that I'm not going to go into a whole lot, but we actually, in a sense, have 2 seasons in terms of our hydrology in Dinosaur. 2 of them is high water and low water. So our second generation of beetles is out and active and moving into areas that may be submerged earlier in the season. Those adults in the larvae are active in foliage. They're host specific. And our goal is not to extirpate the Tamarisk. It's to hurt the Tamarisk a lot. It's to make it less competitive so it stops its progress of invading these areas and begins to no longer dominate the areas that it's already in, so that it becomes less competitive with the natural vegetation. And what I'm going to report on now is our basic Tamarisk beetle monitoring results. What we use is a very quick and fast monitoring. It's based on the Tamarisk Coalition protocol that has been promoted by the Tamarisk Coalition in the past. And what we are basically doing is taking 25 sweeps with a monitoring plot and insect net, counting beetles and counting what we have for each life stage of those beetles, and then taking some basic information down about the state of defoliation, the health of the Tamarisk. Somebody going inside this. There we go. For example, we have some perennial pepperweed here in the understory, so we're also tracking monthly understory in the Tamarisk, but we're not doing that in any very sophisticated way. The protocol is designed to cover a lot of territory and give us an idea of where the beetle is and what its progress is. Here are our beetle release sites. The original releases were in 2006 in the Echo Park area. The logic here being that we're really central to the 3 different reaches of the river: the Yampa River, the Door section, and then the Green River below the confluence. In 2007, we released additional beetles in the canyon for 2 locations. And I should point out that we got our beetles from the Colorado Department of Agriculture, Mosaic Insectary. Appreciate the aid that we've had from Dr. Dan Mead and folks at Palisade in In 2009, we had sufficient numbers of beetles at the park to collect beetles and relocate some into the Yampa Canyon in this area right here. In addition, there have been some releases in proximity to the monument. There were 12,000 beetles released at Bryan's Bottom at Browns Park National Wildlife Refuge. It was not a very successful release. Following year, the Tamarisk Coalition monitored the Green River up in here. We found one beetle. Browns Park Refuge. We may have gotten some of those beetles down into the door. Florida County has also released beetles all over the Basin Mountains area. But this release was just a small number of beetles in the stand that they were released on, was removed the following year. So I don't think it impacted us. Here's what it looked like last year. So we're seeing a dramatic expansion of the beetle into the monument 6 years down the road. And one thing I should point out is that in the upper Yampa Canyon, 2012 was a drought year, and there was not enough water in the Yampa to get down it to do monitoring plots after early June. So these plots in this vicinity are prior to the hatch of larvae. The adults overwinter and they emerge in the spring. So that's our first generation. So what these plots up in here represent is overwintering survival. The rest of the monument area includes plots where we have larval hatches on the rivers explored at that point. So in addition to the kind of Tamarisk Coalition type of protocol, where we basically doing sweeps and then recording the condition of the stand, I've started mapping all of the Tamarisk defoliation twice a season. Once at mid-season after the first generation of beetles, once at the end of the season after the second generation. So I'm going to show you a series of maps to show you how the impact of the beetle has been expanding. Notice in 2008, we're now 2 years after the initial release in this area, we're starting to get defoliation in the vicinity. 2009 relocation hasn't happened yet over here. And essentially these are related to our release areas as well. In 2009, we have our release in this area, and it's starting to become a kind of a hot spot. But what's interesting is that we're seeing a rapid movement of impacts downstream, but not so much upstream. This was the story right up until 2012. For some reason, they seem to not want to go upstream. You can see it starting to fill in. 2011 was interesting because that was, in contrast to 2012, a huge water year, and we had lots and lots of flooding. The Yampa was vulnerable all summer long. And in the war, the Flaming March folks were very panicked about the dam being overtopped by floodwater. And in very early May, they released for about 5 days water that was flows that were high enough to flood all of the Tamarisk habitat that was dam floodplain. And they did that before the beetles, before most of the beetles had emerged from overwintering. And I think we actually lost ground here because of the beetles drowning. In contrast, in 2012, you can see it suddenly exploded. And I think there are a number of reasons for this. The first one, of course, is that we're kind of at that point. We had beetles distributed throughout the park, even though they may not have been in numbers large enough to start causing defoliation. In 2012, it was finally ready to happen. But also, in the winter and spring of 2012, local temperatures were something like 4 degrees above normal. And we had beetle activity earlier. I believe that we also had a higher overwintering survival rate, although there's no way I can demonstrate that. And I think because of the warm weather early in the spring, we probably had more egg and larval survival as well. What I can demonstrate is that we had more rapid larval development. So I'm going to try to go through this really quickly, but basically what I've done is I broke up our plot numbers into 2-week increments. And I broke out the percentage of the total beetles counted during those 2 weeks into the life stage. So you can see in late May and 2011, 100% of the beetles that we collected in our monitoring plots were adults. By early June, 25% were first instars, so we're already seeing those eggs hatch in that first level. Yeah, we get 3 instars, first, second, and third instars, and then the third instars pupate and become adults. So you can see that the percentage of adults declines over time and then bounces back up again because right here, our Tamarisks are dominated by later stage larvae, and they start pupating, and we get our second generation. These are actually first generation adults, but they start laying eggs. It gets messier as you go later in the season because there's more staggering of generations. In 2012, you can see that we were already getting larvae 2 weeks early. But what's really interesting is this point right here, where the larvae are dominating the plants. And this is an important time because the larvae are big, they're eating a lot, and they're causing the most devastation to the tamarisk. So we see a rapid defoliation of tamarisk in it happens twice. It happens around midsummer, and then it happens again in the fall. And that period in 2012 was a bit more earlier. And we can see that our adult supplies, we start already having our first generation adults emerging quite a bit earlier in the season. And those adults emerge, let me circle back to that. This is kind of what it looks like on the tamarisk when you've got the majority of large adults. These are all bird stars. This tamarisk is going to be brown within a week. So these guys pupate, emerge as those first generation adults. They're ready to fly. They're emerging in a place that's already brown. You see that rapid expansion as they move into new areas in the park. So I think that was part of the dynamic in 2012. Okay, I'm going to finish up with just basically a slideshow of what we're actually seeing as results now. And what we're finding is that one of the first questions people ask me when they see me doing the monitoring plots is, well, so when are the beetles going to kill the tamarisk? And what we're really looking for is not the immediate mortality of the individual plants, but rather a gradual decline in their viability and their canopy health. In this photograph, where that mechanical removal is happening is up here at the Seacliff Beach. This is mechanically removed. You can see we've got miles of this stuff as well. What the beetles are doing is starting to kill the stems on this plant, so the canopy is being reduced. This brown is 2012 green foliage that's now been defoliated by the beetle. That's why it's brown. You can see there's lots of rays which are dead stems. So we're seeing a gradual opening up of that canopy. There's sunlight's getting into the understory. We're starting to see vegetation moving back into underneath these canopies. This tree here was first defoliated in 2008. I passed by it a week before this photograph was taken, and it was absolutely free. So it happens very quickly in these ways. And you can see 5 years down the road, this plant is still viable. It's still got green on it. It's already being defoliated again, but a lot of dead stems. This was one of our 2009 release spots. I took this photograph the day we released the beetles there. You can see that it's starting to look a lot more unhealthy. There are more dead stems. The tamarisk also starts to get this poodle tails. The foliage itself tends to clump more into small areas closer to the main stems of the plant as it loses its ability to sustain those stems farther from the core. And about a month after this was totally brown. This tree I've actually got a photographic record of at least twice a season for each generation since 2008. I started doing the monitoring in 2008. Reports that this tree here was actually defoliated in 2007 as well, but I don't know how much it was defoliated by years. Whether it was partially defoliated or 100%. But you can see that certainly after 6 years, it is starting to look a lot worse, but it's still viable. It's still alive. It hasn't gone away yet. This tree is in a particularly good place for Tamarisk because it's got deep soils. In fact, the 2011 deposited a lot of sand here. The sand's maybe a foot higher than it was in its own ground. So it's got a very extensive root system, and it's going to take a lot for it to when we start to get back to these multiple foliations, but it is declining in health. This is Mitten Park. This is actually where we gathered the beetles to do the relocation in 2009. Change in herbaceous cover in this area here as a result of the 2011 floods. We had water all the way back up into here. And so that's why it's changed in the foreground here. But you can see it again. We're seeing a decline in the viability of these plants. But they're still alive and still being found out. What's interesting is that on the opposite side of the river, this is a very mature, very large stand Tamarisk. It did not show impacts from the beetle for a number of years after we started seeing the impacts on this side of the river. But in 2012, it was definitely getting browned out. And then this is kind of a no-brainer, but it's what I'm going to wrap up with. We're seeing the health of the Tamarisk decline faster in its situation where it's being stressed in its food system, or in a lot of situations for us where the Tamarisk may be actually inundated by the river during that first generation of beetles. So it's actually not being able to put on significant foliage until the water goes down. And then that second generation of beetles is right there and ready to move in and start carrying it. So this was our collection of the beetles. These plants later in the season would have had even more foliage. They were underwater probably 2 to 2.5 weeks before this photograph was taken. So they're still foliating even in late July. That's what this place looked like just a few years before. And now you can see that, especially after 2011, when these guys were underwater for all the way through July. We're seeing pretty close to 100% mortality now. And this is this big stand back here on the other side of the room. And this is my last slide. I'll sum up with this, but clearly those spawning marks that we're concerned about with the possibility of the Tamarisk continuing to invade and to create sedimentation, they are being impacted probably more quickly because of the fact that the beetles are causing rapid mortality in those situations. This is one of the areas of concern on the Yampa River, and it's actually on an island. There's a channel over here, and there's something you can't see back here. It was taken in the second day of August, I think, in 2012. In a normal water year, you would have seen water over this gravel probably into the first week or two of August. So it was an exceptional year last year. You can see that this plant's dead. This one is dead. There's a little bit of foliage that's been ground out on this one. But we're losing those cameras. And the fate of the spawning bars is that we're also going back in and doing physical plans as well. And if necessary, we're going to take out the dead cameras. But for the most part, we're just going to let the beetles do their stuff. And we're not too concerned about going back in and removing dead cameras because those cameras are dying. You do see the native veg move back in again. So we're going to wrap up with that. There's my contact stuff.
Do we have any questions for Peter?
What is being done about some of those dense thickets of dead standing Tamarisk skeletons, essentially, after they've been defoliated?
For the most part, we're not going to do anything about it. Part of that is just simply not enough time and labor. But we're not as much of a concern for us. That may be evaluated in the future. We'll see that there is a problem. We're not particularly worried about fire. I think there's compelling evidence that the tamarisk with green foliage on it is far more flammable than dead tamarisk and dead stems. Where there may be an issue is on places like the spawning burrows, where even dead stems can continue to contribute to sedimentation, and in those cases we'll probably do some removal. So it's going to be on a case-by-case situation, but in the majority of the park, it's actually not, at this point, too big of a problem.
Thanks for your presentation. I may have missed this. I apologize if I did. You mentioned the goal is not to extirpate the tamarisk. Why? Why not? And won't it be a long-term issue? And what's the long-term plan then?
The long-term plan is that the tamarisk is no longer as invasive as it is now, and it is less capable of outcompeting the native vegetation. The reason why we would not want to extirpate it is because we actually want the beetles to persist as well. And so the long-range vision is that eventually you have a system where the tamarisk is not as big a problem in terms of displacing native plants, but it is there, and it becomes a kind of more mannered, good-mannered part of the system. And a kind of another version of that question that I have on here is, well, so you're showing us all these examples of tamarisk dying when they're not as good a health. Well, we also are still getting a lot of germination of tamarisk every year. And the tamarisk isn't really going to go away. There's also never been a biocontrol organism released that has extirpated its host. It has not happened.
Joey, one more? Can we do one more? Real quick. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I'm just wondering what effects you might be seeing in the understory where the beetles are defoliating, since you've been taking such a close look. And I've had some casual observations of some native vegetation that's actually using the skeletons of the tamarisk to become much more robust than they normally would. And just wondering if you've seen anything like that in Dinosaur.
That makes sense to me. In a lot of these stands, we're just starting to see that point where the canopy is opening up, so I'm just beginning to start to see stuff growing in underneath again. What we're seeing, of course, is that what's there is what's growing in. So if we are in a place where everywhere else around the tamarisk is just knapweed, then we still have an issue. But we're fortunate in Dinosaur that we have a good, healthy system if we can just keep it from continuing to decay because of the arrival of the tamarisk. And in those cases, yes, I am seeing native plants moving in underneath these. And whether they're more robust or not I can't say quantitatively, but I think that sort of makes sense to me in terms of what I'm seeing.
Thanks, Peter.